Okay, so once again, good afternoon, everyone. I don't think there's any good evening or good morning over here, right? So again, you can just simply call me So or Kiet Hyong. I'm the head of solution engineering, supporting a Rubrik Asia region. And today, shift gear a little bit. We talk about cloud native protection across all cloud platforms, right? So-called the hybrid multi-cloud. That's the in thing today, right? Data mobility managing across hybrid multi-cloud. As you know, Rubrik, we are data protection solution, and we've grown out of that. And of course, from data centers, we modernize data protection, and then slowly getting into in fact, in parallel in terms of cloud native and slowly building that out to be able to support hybrid multi-cloud environment. And in the past few sessions, been focusing a lot on a cyber resiliency topic. So it's really something more interesting today for myself, and just feel free to ask more questions in a Q&A as well. Right, so take a look at the landscape today. I think this will look quite familiar to some of you, right? So especially when it comes to data protection, right, you have to deal with multiple data sources, right? Multiple targets and different choices. And how do you mobilize data from on-prem into the cloud and then across multi-cloud, right? And then you start thinking about how do you perform disaster recovery, not just about recovering of the data. How do you perform searches? Are you able to search data just on the on-prem the moment you ingest data from a data source, or you'll be able to search in the cloud as you manage throughout the entire data life cycle? And then of course the security and the compliance, and then in terms of from an operation aspect comes in as well. But of course, protection across such environments as you progress with your cloud transformation, your digital transformation is really challenging. There's multiple tools, as we know that traditionally the traditional on-prem three-tier backup solution is really built for on-prem and tape-based, right? As the landscape changes with the progressions of the cloud transformation, that you find more challenging, right? With multiple types of console, different tools and different skill set required. How do you harmonize that? How do you make it simpler, right? To reduce complexity, to be able to implement consistent policy across on-prem and hybrid multi-cloud? And how do you simplify the recovery process, right? Even more, nowadays with the, cyber resiliency and ransomware topic, how do you move beyond just simply data protection? And if you look at it, there's no centralized management as you look at the different tools available in the market today, right? So as we evolve, we're trying to build different management point, trying to manage different data protection across different platforms and so on. So Rubrik at the core, of course, we, for the start, the first wave of adoptions is really helping customers to collapse the complexity of the multiple components for those traditional data protection platforms, right? And then to be able to manage it with complete automations, SLA automations. How do you do it in a more imperative manner, right? So sorry, how do you do it in a more declarative approach as compared to imperative manner? How do you do a rapid recovery with a scale out architecture, right? Not just about collapsing all the complexity into a single software fabric and then scale it out. Look for opportunity to always increase the parallelisms, right? When you ingest the data, when you perform a recovery of the data. And then from an operational aspect, right? API first automation together with the security aspect, right? How do you secure your data as you modernize? The speed to production is important, right? To be able to cope with the business demand. But at the same time, you can't go away with your security. You have to go in line with security. How do you leverage on data for more return from a security standpoint? And of course, integrations and extend that capabilities into cloud protection. And when it comes to a cloud, right, it's not just about protecting cloud in the form of IaaS, but we also look into different form of cloud consumption, right? How do we then to be able to harmonize the protection and management of that right, across IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS, right, from that perspective. And building on top of that, we also gave customer more data services to be able to consume, right? So I mentioned about going beyond data protection, right? So we allow customers to leverage on the data that we ingested, right, for strategic, purposes, right? So for more strategic advantage for tactical use cases, right? The moment you ingest the data, you can actually leverage the data for some of the use cases like dev tests, right, and threat hunting and so on. And not only that, we are able to make use of the analytical metadata that we have generated from the snapshots to be able to detect any anomalies for cyber resiliency, as well as leveraging our data classification engine to detect any sensitive data, right? You can set compliance policy. We have actually a set of compliance policy that is aligned with the regular expressions that is aligned with the compliance policy, or you can actually custom build your dictionary, right, for the data classification engine. And we are able to combine that with our anomalous detections for cyber resiliency use case, right? So that's just giving you an overview of our next generation data management, right? Going beyond simply backups and recovery, right? Allowing customers to leverage on your data as a strategic asset for more tactical use cases. Right. So as we build up the use cases, as we look across the different use cases at different stage of your cloud journey, you realize that, hey, you are able to leverage on a Rubrik, right, for different use cases at different stage of your cloud journey. For a start, of course, we ingest the data from on-prem and you leverage on the cloud for long-term retention, right? So you can actually further extend that capabilities to be able to convert, right, your on-prem images into a cloud format, right? So you ingest data from on the on-prem for data protection, and you are able to extend that capabilities to allow our customers to convert, right? So that's with our cloud instantiation use case, right? So the cloud conversion, which we call it as a cloud on, right? So the first use case is actually a cloud out, right? Cloud out, meaning that you archive to a cloud for long-term retention archiving, and we're leveraging on that capabilities. We perform a cloud conversions with a cloud on to instantiate, right? Convert it into a cloud format, instantiate in a cloud for development and testing, for lift and shift migration purposes, right? So these are the two key use cases as we build up the hybrid cloud, on-prem to hybrid cloud kind of transformation. As we progress with the cloud journey, and of course there are certain customers who go in parallel. You look at what kind of workloads that are suitable for cloud native, for example, and you're running a cloud in a AWS as an EC2, Azure VMs, GCP, and so on, right? So we do have a solutions that allow us to be able to provide a SaaS protection solution, SaaS protection model for your cloud workload, right? So basically, we have a control plane known as Polaris. It does an API call into your cloud VMs, right? Cloud virtual machines, in EC2, in AWS, for example, right? To API call to perform a snapshots, and we spin up Kubernetes container to perform indexing, right? So how differently we are doing it as compared to the other players in the market is that we don't really replicate the 3-tier architectures on-prem in the cloud, right? We do not have to do it in the way that you have to deploy a single master with a single dependency on a single catalog. We don't have to deploy worker nodes or media managers or backup servers to run a persistent compute in your cloud environment, in your account that consume the resources. We simply spin up elastic compute, right? Based on Kubernetes container, EKS for AWS, AKS for your Azure, and of course GCP as well, to index the snapshots, right? And leveraging on this to be able to manage your data lifecycle, even tier into S3 containers, for example, for long-term retention management of the entire data lifecycle. So this actually the Polaris giving a lot of flexibility right? So we'll discuss a little bit deeper in a short while. But there comes another questions. What about IaaS? And I do have workloads that's running on an IaaS consumption model, application workloads, for example, Oracle and so on. And we'll look into it in a short while. And that is being protected with a cloud-based protection model, right? So basically, in a cloud-based protection model, you run a cloud cluster, right? So you run a virtual cluster that just like what you have on on-prem, right? So which is known as a cloud data management cluster, the CDM cluster. You have a cloud consumption model for that, and you can actually run that in a scale-out manner, right? And you ingest the data across the scale-out node, and you to be able to manage data such that you can replicate back to on-prem across hybrid multi-cloud environment for archiving and so on, right? So that's being handled with our cloud-based protection, which is known as cloud cluster. So this actually build our, our use cases, enabling customers and different stage of their cloud journey. So again, as customers are embarking on cloud, as you know that you look across the landscape today, there are customers that came across, right, using Lambda, right, for providing a cloud protection scripting, and you have to there's a lot of challenges in managing all those scripts and so on, right? So that's even more complex if you have multiple accounts to manage, right? So looking across the cloud protection methodologies, right, is pretty much similar to what you are doing on-prem for the past 20, 30 years. Retention policies, frequencies, replications, expiry, all in one single backup policies. And imagine you have to repeat that, you have to manage that across your multiple account, sometimes even across multi-cloud environment, right? So, and then not to mention that you have different regions for that, right? So just imagine your business trying to scale and you are trying to manage that kind of protection across multiple cloud and multiple accounts. That's going to be very challenging, right? How do you really streamline that process, make it more productive from an operational perspective, right? It's new tech, but then same problems, right? So even though you go with your cloud transformation as you embark on a digital transformation, you have workloads that's running in the cloud, but you encounter different set of issues, right? How do you really maintain control and visibility with, at the same time streamlining your operation and having a better productivity, at the same time being able to mobilize your data across different cloud platform and different accounts. Okay. Right, so top of mind, right? So just to put what I've run through into perspective, right? So from an operational perspective, right, to improve your productivity, right? Do I have baseline backups of everything? How can I prove it, right? From a compliance perspective and from a security perspective, is my data visible and secure, right? And what about ransomware attack, right? Do you have isolation, right? How do you maintain consistency in the policy? How do you create a role-based access control? How do you restrict access control to that, right? And what about building a shadow? What about shadow IT building DIY tools, right? So those are the kind of challenges that we are seeing as customers grow their workloads in the hybrid multi-cloud environments, in the multi-cloud environments, especially when it comes to restorations, right? So how easy it is, right, to restore a database, right? How easy it is to normalize your applications after your restoration. Am I prepared to provide any proof points for compliance and audits? Reporting, right? Reporting is another one key challenges as you go into a multi-cloud environment. And of course, taking a look at our approach, we aim to have a unify and simplify our data protection across a hybrid multi-cloud. As you know that Rubrik is actually born out of the cloud natively. We built from scratch to be able to handle not just for securely for ransomware protection, right? That's for on-prem. Yes, we have a Polaris SaaS GPS console to be able to manage multi-location, multi-data centers, right? And multi-remote offices. At the same time, with the same GPS console, you can then manage it across multi-hybrid cloud, right? And of course, the next is that we are looking at cyber resiliency at the point of data in the cloud, right? So for those who are not aware, yesterday we just have a public announcement with Rubrik, Rubrik Vote, Cloud Vote, right? So that's our collaborations with Microsoft Azure to have a Rubrik Cloud Vote based on the Rubrik immutable architectures solutions that we deploy a Rubrik Vote in the cloud, right? Bringing that capabilities from on-prems into the cloud in collaborations with Microsoft Azure, right? And of course, last but not least, that control and visibility I was talking about to be a drive governance and compliance. And in every IT organizations, if you look at the key KPI for the IT directors and the CIO, definitely is to be able to drive lower costs, reduce your TCO, and how do you make more of the less, right? So how do you realize more return of the less resources, right? So those are the things that that we're looking at how we can help organizations to be able to manage their data more effectively as they embark on a digital transformation and cloud transformation. So how it really works from a SaaS data protection perspective, right? So I walk you through the landscapes that we are seeing now in the market, the challenges in managing a hybrid multi-cloud data management, right, as you protect the data across the data life cycles, right? And I also mentioned about cloud native data protection, right? So how differently we are doing it, as I mentioned earlier, we have a Polaris SaaS, right? So this is actually a SaaS model, and you're able to talk to the three hyperscaler, namely Microsoft Azure, AWS, and GCP, right? And how differently we are doing it, as I mentioned earlier, we do not have to replicate the on-prem architectures in the cloud, right? So basically setting up across account, right? So that customer do not have to maintain, to allow a permanent key to be maintained, right? In order to access that particular account. So a cross-cloud account is actually a much better approach, and it's the best practices from a cloud security authentication point of view, right? So as to be able to access, giving a IAM role, sufficient minimum IAM roles to be able to access and perform the necessary tasks to protect your data, right? So Polaris as a SaaS control plane does not require customers to move any of your data anywhere or out of your account. You do not have to move your data off the account, right? So as a SaaS control plane, performing an API call to perform a snapshots on your VMs in a cloud account, and then mount that snapshots onto a Kubernetes containers, and then index it and manage the data lifecycle, right? So just imagine what's the key benefits here. As you do not maintain a persistent compute, you don't have to worry about code upgrade, right? So the code upgrade is all taken care by the SaaS, right? It's all managed and taken care by the SaaS. And the containers wise, the images are all auto upgraded as well. So there's nothing for you to manage at all, right? So it's very simple, it's very efficient and highly productive, right? So from a backup operation point of view. We also deliver an enterprise class policy engine, right? So for those who are very familiar with backup protection policies on-prem, you will know how painful it is to create hundreds and thousands of policy for different types of workloads. Some of them, due to limitations, you might have to tie to specific workloads. And imagine that kind of a challenges as you grow into the cloud, and even worse into multi-cloud environments across multiple accounts. that can be very challenging to manage. So we do have an enterprise class policy, help you to streamline your backup policy management, right? So it's just a policy that you maintain and you can actually apply it across multi-hybrid cloud environment, right? So isolation across cloud account, and a region, region replication, cross accounts and a region replication, right? That allows you to have an isolations, right, of your data that you have ingested, the data that you're protecting across a different account and different region. So the moment we kick in the policies, the API call, and then we are able to create a snapshots of the VM, and then you can actually replicate it across to another regions or to another account, right? So that's an external call to the cloud platform's API, right? The recovery is very simple. You just have to, it's very seamless from Polaris console point of view. You just kick off the recovery, and you can actually seamlessly recover and restore your VM back to the original account. So whatever we have generated, that's immutable snapshots, and of course you can have permissions to deny any access to those the snapshots, to deny any access to the environment as well, right? So the snapshots that we have generated, those are immutable snapshots across the three key hyperscaler, namely Microsoft, Azure, AWS, and GCP. From a security standpoint. And of course, that's providing a centralized visibility and control, right, with a Polaris GPS, right? So there's very comprehensive reporting console. You can actually click, as you can see on this screen, right? So there's a report function from a compliance, from operational standpoint, and you can actually build up the reports, right? Very flexible operations. And that's highly automated lifecycle management in the cloud, right? So in a Terraform code, right, you can actually have the infra as coding, not just that you can apply it for the on-prem CDN cluster, right? You can apply it in the cloud as well, describe the apps, apply it, and translate into an API request, and auto configure the resources with app-specific protection, right? So automating the SLA assignment mapping process to be able to automate the entire data protection lifecycle management. So what about the SaaS model, right? For SaaS consumption model, right? So whatever I just described, there are cloud native workloads that's running in the cloud, but there's M365 SaaS models that the customer wish to protect. So we do have a cloud native approach. Likewise, we do have a Polaris SaaS for protecting our M365 workloads, right? M365 data, right? So traditional architectures are not really built from SaaS, as I mentioned. We do not replicate the on-prem architectures in the cloud. Legacy approaches, always the lift and shift approach, and that's always very complex tool from that you replicate from on-prem to the cloud, which can be very painful to manage and scale, right? So the same models apply to protecting a Microsoft M365, right? So we deploy a Polaris SaaS platform. For this, we do it quite differently, right? So we do it very differently, as in we give customers the flexibility of choice to be able to consume it as a customer hosted or a Rubrik hosted model, right? So customer hosted, meaning that the Kubernetes containers and the storage that you are consuming is within your account, right? So for customers that are very sensitive, is very concerned about data sovereignty, right? You want to maintain it within your account. That will be the models that you are going for, right? So for customers who are more concerned about, costing, you want to have a very consistent, predictable cost, right? Regardless of the frequency of your backup, regardless of the growth, right? So from a per user point of view, right? So you can actually go for a Rubrik hosted, such that you have a more predictable costing, right? So in that model, Rubrik consumptions for the consumptions for the Kubernetes compute and the storage costs will be under the Rubrik hosted model, will be under the Rubrik account, such that you just pay for a flat licensing, right, for a specific tier, right? So that really makes it much easier for customers to consume our M365 protection. Right, just a quick checkpoint, right? Of course, we do have a very good customer success story globally. Meredith is one of them, right? So this is actually quite different. It's not just cloud native protection, but they actually consume both Rubrik CDM, Cloud Data Protection Management, on-prem, right? And extend that capabilities into AWS protection as well. They achieve very good 90%, in terms of management time saving, right? From 80 hours per week to just few hours, right? So improve in productivities, right? So a lot of time we cannot just look at it from CapEx perspective, but because the productivity costs as well, there's a lot of FTE saving, right? From tools that has much better simplicity, much better operational streamlining from operational aspect, right? Productivity savings, faster recovery, right? So that's the mitigations of the downtime, right? Faster recovery as compared to on tape, right? Those are the key outcomes that we are achieving for the customers, right? So so cloud native protection for multi-cloud environments across the 3 main hyperscaler, right? So these are the key summaries that I've just ran through. One questions that you might have right now, right? So I mentioned about, you still remember the cloud journey? We talk about the cloud native followed by the cloud clusters that I mentioned, right? So where do we go for what kind of data protection model, right? So cloud native, yes, that's great, but the communications doesn't handle databases that's running in the EC2, right? So whatever I just ran through, that's a cloud native approach, right? For those that is really a IaaS, yes, RDS, yes, platform as a service, RDS, M365, yes, right? For any databases, right? So for any databases, lift and shift and run in the cloud, right? So we actually we call it as application workloads over IaaS. We have actually a different data protection model for protecting those which is under our cloud editions, also known as a cloud cluster, right? So for those, we actually deploy a scale-out cloud cluster, which is a virtualized versions of our Rubrik CDM on-prem that is running in the cloud as a VMs, right? And it is able to scale out seamlessly, right? So put that into perspective. How does it really run for SQL and Oracle, protecting SQL and Oracles over IaaS, right? So the same policy engines that we run, right, for on-prem CDM, and the same policy managements that I'm showing for the Polaris GPS, right? So you don't have to run different methods. You don't have to run a different console, or you don't have to run a different backup policies, right? It can be the same policy, although it's a different protection methods or protection model, right? So control plane, talking to control plane, there's auto discovery of your database cluster, auto discovery of your databases and tablespace, right? So having that kind of discovery, and also inheritance of the backup policies, right? So you inherit the backup policies. If you assign a backup policy to a particular instance, right, the underlying database will inherit the backup policies and to be automate the protection, right? So it helps to streamline the DBA restoration process and control. And you can also perform a self-service cloning, right? Self-service cloning to a different VMs or to an alternate host, for example, right? For development and testing purpose, for churning out our reports. Right, so we also extend that capabilities, the cloud cluster capabilities to cater for SAP HANA, right? So recently I've seen a very good tractions in terms of winning in a SAP HANA, right? So we do have a very good story around that as we see more and more SAP HANA that's running in the cloud, right? So Rubrik provides the capabilities for you to be able to migrate or replicate SAP HANA to and from cloud, right? We are running a virtualized Rubrik cloud clusters within the cloud itself, right? It can be on the GCP, it can be on any cloud platforms, right? Providing a multi-cloud control and policy management, right? And with our latest snappables capability provided for SAP HANA, we also enable auto discovery of the databases with browsable database path. And there's automated backend API integration such that it has automated configurations, right? Making it more simpler for time to production and time to value for your data protections. Another good use case of a cloud cluster, that's the Rubrik for VMware Hybrid Cloud Protection. Today, we do protect VMware Cloud in hyperscaler. It's not just a VMware Cloud for AWS. It's VMware Cloud on the AWS, Azure, as well as GCP, right? So providing that capabilities to be a seamlessly backup and protect your data on-prem, as well as on-prem VMware Private Cloud, as well as your VMware Cloud that's running on the 3 main hyperscaler. Right, so putting that a little bit more technical details on that, for those who are really familiar with Rubrik, you notice there's some differences. We do run hot hat proxy for VMware Cloud, right? Mainly because of the difference in the way we do control plane communications for where VMware Cloud is concerned, right? So auto spin up of the hot hat proxies to be able to manage the data path to ingest the data from a VMware Cloud. This is just an example on the AWS. We do it seamlessly for Azure, for GCP as well, right? So Rubrik is deployed outside of your AWS software-defined data centers to provide an air gap, right? And providing a secure storage domain. As you can see that the immutable file system, the immutable architectures that we are providing in the Rubrik CDN is available in your cloud cluster as well, right? It's available in your virtual consumption model as well, which is providing a secure vault, right? With the immutable data vault, right? And providing a data at rest encryptions, right? So with that, what about disaster recovery, right? So with that integrations, you can actually look forward to additional enhancement to be able to orchestrate disaster recovery from on-prem and into the cloud, right? So imagine you have a VMware private cloud that's running in your on-prem data centers, right? You can configure the blueprints, set dependency between apps, webs, and databases, and then how you want to orchestrate your disaster recovery across these three application tier, right? You can do more with your backups and perform all this in a very automated manner, right? SaaS delivered DR deployment, right? Management integrated into your backup platforms, orchestrates the recovery, test and execute failover, failback in just 2 simple clicks, right? So simple in place orchestrations of ransomware recovery, right? Ensuring compliance as well, right? You reports to compliance and audit team on DR readiness, right? The whole process allow you to perform your continuance of business exercise much more simpler. I'm into the last 2 slides of my presentation, right? So this is actually the announcements that I was talking about. For those who are interested to find out more, just feel free to reach out to our marketing Alicia or reach out to our team in area Ying, who's our country manager for Philippines, or your sales engineering lead, Fred, who is supporting Philippines as well, right? So for this really allow us to have a complete isolated offsite archive, right, for your backup. Not only that is residing on an Azure blob, but also an immutable architectures with a zero trust cluster design, that we deploy, and we work together with Azure to be able to develop that kind of capabilities in the cloud, right? Simple to leverage a fully managed service, right? With a highly predictable cost, right? So what's the next step? Right, there's free trial backups and recovery for your M365. For those who are really interested to find out more, just scan the barcode or just do a search on the Google, right, for Rubrik M365 trial, right? So you get you to the form, and you can actually sign up for the free trial, right? And discuss with Rubrik on an M365 protection, and you get a chance to get free, right, Camelback running a vest, right? So that's something that you can look out for. And feel free to meet our Philippine team, right? I mentioned Ariel Inc., right? His email is stated here, and our solution engineer Frederick, right? So feel free to reach out to them. So with that, I've concluded my presentation. Thank you so much. Don't back up, go forward. Thanks a lot. Back to you. Back to the MC.